This is good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. This is quite cavernous. So can you all hear me? Just to make sure? Okay, great. Welcome. You're all here for the 30th anniversary of U.S. Vietnam relations from enemies, former enemies, and present partners. Is that correct? So you're all here. This is me, Professor Lien-Hang Nguyen. It's really good to be here. Thank you to all of those who had joined yesterday. But today we have a different series of events that I will get into. But first, let me introduce myself. So I'm the Dorothy Borg Associate Professor in the History of the United States and East Asia. I'm also the director of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, and along with John Phan, please stand up, John Phan, co-founder of Global Vietnam Studies. I'm really happy to welcome you to the second day of programming commemorating the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War and the 30th anniversary of U.S. Vietnam reconciliation. Before I dive in, let me just say a little bit about the Institute. The Weatherhead East Asian Institute last year turned 75, so this year technically we're 76 years old. We have been a vital part of Columbia since the Institute was founded in '49, bringing together scholars, students, and the public to promote understanding and scholarship about East, Southeast, and Inner Asia. Over the last 76 years, it's grown into a dynamic space for research, teaching, and dialogue, and it continues to be a hub for inquiry and analysis as the politics, economies, and social life of the region changes, part of the reason why we're here today, to hear about these changes. But before I get into the program, I do want to say a little bit about Global Vietnam Studies. So it is under the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, and it's one of our most exciting new growth areas. Again, we have always been very strong in the study of China, Japan, Korea. We expanded into Inner Asia, which includes Mongolia, Tibet, and Southeast Asia is our most recent region in which we have begun to broaden our expertise. But really for me, and I think for Southeast Asian studies, it's really Vietnam studies that's going to anchor the study of the region. And under our directorship, we do have thriving programs under Global Vietnam Studies. They include Digitizing Vietnam under Professor John Phan, working very closely with faculty and the libraries at Fulbright University, Vietnam. One of its founders is here sitting, the chair still of the Board of Trustees at Fulbright University, Vietnam. The two universities work very closely together to create the largest digital hub with regard to Vietnamese sources from the pre-modern era to the present. Another initiative that we have is what used to be called the Vietnam Executive Leadership Program under Harvard Kennedy School. Now that it has moved to Columbia, we have rebranded it, Hien, which I would love to have her stand up to and wave, along with Tommy, Tommy Vallely. The two of them, we stole them from Harvard. They're here with us at Columbia. And what we're rebranding is called the Vietnam Policy Dialogue Institute. And under the VPDI, we really try to tackle issues that face the United States and Vietnam, particularly as Vietnam develops and tries to reach its benchmarks for 2030 to 2050 in the lead up, particularly for the 14th Party Congress in January 2026. And what we do is we bring Vietnamese leaders within the government as well as industry heads and really try to put together a series of programming that includes faculty from Columbia. I see Chinh has also been doing some of these talks for us, so leaders within the United States as well in various sectors. And together, we really try to involve the Vietnamese government in sort of discussions about really what is the best path in terms of modernization and to reach their goals, particularly, as I said, for the 14th Party Congress. In addition to Digitizing Vietnam, VPDI, we also have a very robust language program. Dzung, can you wave there? There's Dzung. She is the director of the Vietnamese language program, along with her whole team. And we offer 4 levels of Vietnamese, from beginner all the way to mixed advanced and to advanced. One day we will offer Nom. I'm hoping, Hang Nom, under John Phan. And then we truly will be the only institute or university that is able to offer all of these languages. Together, we are trying to establish a summer language program that will also include an internship option. And this is particularly for my students. I'm always trying to promote Vietnam, to travel to Vietnam, to live in Vietnam, to work in Vietnam, and hopefully one day with potentially your support and sponsorship, we'll be able to set that up. The last area we have is, last initiative that we've been promoting is really about Vietnamese arts and culture, in particular film. So we have, as the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, artist in residence, Tony Bui, who is an award-winning Sundance Film Festival recipient of 3 of the biggest awards, here with us the past 2 years teaching courses on Vietnam War in Vietnamese and American cinema, as well as other courses in School of the Arts. He will be here later in the day. Along with Duy Linh Tu, who also cannot be here, the 4 organizers put together the series devoted to 5030. As you know, sort of one of the things we really want to do is to focus on our students. And here I have taught this year what is called the Vietnam War Special 50th Anniversary Edition. And so you'll see, for the speakers, a lot of the students from that class come through, and they will have very difficult questions for you, as they've had for me over the semester. And they were amazing last night, and I expect more of that to come. Remember, students, the microphones are here on the side, so please do ask questions. But the conversations we're having about 5030 really comes from this class that Tommy and I have taught together with some guest lectures. And right, Tommy, we've done a pretty good job giving them a pretty good foundation, the history of that tragic war. And so today, what we hope to do is to tease out some of the themes and questions we grappled with in class and bring it into this event that we have going on today. So without further ado, I'm going to call the panelists up to the front for the first panel. I guess I am in charge, but I don't, okay, somebody else is clicking on. So, okay, so the first panel, okay, everyone is up here? Okay. I still have, your tech works. Everyone check?
Testing.
We're good.
Okay. So I am the chair of this panel that really looks at the history of U.S. Vietnam reconciliation, so the past 30 years of relations between the United States and Vietnam. And I will dispense, just like yesterday, with the formal titles, because here I think we're all friends. So I will take it in order that, are you all sitting next to? So I'm Tommy. You know, I'm sitting under, and you are Lien. We're not sitting with our circles. Shall we move? Shall we do musical chairs?
I'm embarrassing the ambassador.
No, only the ambassador is sitting in his correct. The 2 ambassadors are, they can actually follow instructions. They're sitting underneath. Yeah, he's here. I'm going to be Chinh. I've always talked and joked about that Chinh and I need to trade places, that he needs to teach and be a professor at Columbia University, and I will have an empire, private equity empire.
It seems like a nightmare for me.
He's a natural. He'd be great. Okay, so again, I'm Lien-Hang Nguyen. I'm the chair of this panel. Next to me is the moderator, Mr. Chinh Chu. He is the founding partner, was the founding partner at Blackstone, and is the president and CEO of CC Capital, and also a speaker in VPDI and one day a Columbia professor. To my immediate left is Ambassador Dzung. He is the current ambassador, Vietnam ambassador to the United States. Nguyen, Dzung, but I never do that Z, Yum, which is my southern accent. And then we have former Ambassador David Shear. When were you ambassador to Vietnam? 2011 to 2014. Yes, and then to the very end, last but never least, is Professor Tommy Vallely, again, founder of Fulbright University Vietnam and professor here at Columbia University. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you, Lien. By the way, is our microphones working? You guys can hear us okay? Great.
Hello?
So Lien is really worried that I'm going to tell some jokes or make some comments about her that's embarrassing. So she has written me a full memo regarding what to say and what not to say. I will, of course, ignore all of that. And if anybody wants to have embarrassing stories about Lien, please approach me afterwards. I'm happy to tell you. But with all seriousness, it's a pleasure to be here, ambassadors rather, and Tommy. It's great to be here to moderate this. This is an important event because you need perspective and you need the history to have the right course of action for today. I think Winston Churchill famously said, the longer you look into the past, the further you can have perspective in the future. And reconciliation and the 30th, 50th anniversaries are about that. And I'm glad that Lien, with all joking aside, is building up the studies for Columbia for Vietnam. And it's a very special day for me as well, because on the 50th anniversary, my sister was born. She was actually born on the exact date of April 30th, 1975, Kathy. And for every one of her birthday, we're reminded of the anniversary that we're here to celebrate. Also on the 30th anniversary, we also had a very important milestone for Vietnam. Obviously, there was reconciliation between the U.S. and Vietnam. And 6 months prior to that, I was a young associate at Blackstone. And I was asked by my chairman, Pete Peterson, to head up a delegation to arrange, not to head up, but to arrange for the delegation to go back to Vietnam to normalize, to help think through how we're going to normalize relations with Vietnam. This is, of course, under Bill Clinton. Before Bill Clinton had the official decision, he wanted a group to go back to Vietnam. And Pete Peterson, as you know, was former Secretary of Commerce. He was also the chairman of Blackstone. And I knew nothing about politics. I know nothing about diplomacy. I knew very little, frankly, about Vietnam. But because I was Vietnamese, he asked me to take on this task. So we organized a group to go back to Vietnam to explore the normalization that included Pete Peterson, David Rockefeller, the Rockefeller family, the Haas family who owns Levi, Katharine Graham, who owned the New York, who was the editor of the Washington Post, Henry Kravis, head of KKR, and Chinh, a 27-year-old associate. So we had to negotiate very important things like everybody wanted to bring in the private planes. The Vietnamese government absolutely would not forbid that. We lost Katharine Graham's suitcase in the airport, flying Vietnam Airlines, and she didn't have any clothes to attend the meetings. We had to get a tailor at 11 o'clock at night because she's a little bit taller than the average Vietnamese woman, so we can't buy anything at the market. We had to, right, exactly. All the speeches had to be vetted by the Vietnamese government, all the meetings. So it was a very important event, I think, for the normalization of Vietnam. And that was my first time back to Vietnam since I left in 1975. Luckily, everything turned out to be a success, aside from Katharine Graham being really upset at me for not having the clothes. So we're here today in full circle for the 30th and 50th anniversary, and I'm very honored to be here with our esteemed guests. So I think with that, I'm going to turn over to our three panelists to talk for a few minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. I may interject with some questions and answers.
Am I first? Is my microphone working?
Yes, it is.
Good morning, and Chinh, thank you for that introduction. It gives me a couple of things that I might talk about with respect to both the normalization process and the Vietnam War itself, right? So I've had a somewhat of a I went to Vietnam in 1985 because I wanted to be elected to the U.S. Congress. And I wanted to follow John McCain. I watched John McCain on television. He had gone to the Vallely prison with Walter Cronkite, and that was a magnificent television. That's when there was only a few networks. And so John McCain's visiting Vietnam with Walter Cronkite in the 10 years after the end of the war. And I watched him on television. I watched him come out of prison. And when he comes out of prison, he buys a rose on the street, and he gives the rose to a woman passing by on the street. And I said, I want to be that person. And so I was then an elected member of the Massachusetts legislature, and I said, I want to run for Congress, and I want to be John McCain. I want to be part of that, what he was trying to do, which was understand the war and understand how to have diplomatic relations. I got to know John, just to sort of put it in, just to start how difficult it was at the beginning to actually accomplish what Chinh and his group did when they went there. It was difficult. So John McCain goes to Hanoi and comes back with a fairly at the time controversial idea. He wants to bridge the gap. He wants to establish a dialogue mechanism, and he proposes that the United States open an interest section in a foreign embassy in Vietnam. I think it was either the French embassy or the Swiss embassy. But McCain's idea was, let's start talking to the Vietnamese. And I think this comes from a strategy that Vietnam had under the former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Nguyen Quoc. So Nguyen Quoc is a giant in this space of normalizing relations between the United States and Vietnam. He had tried during the administration of President Carter with Ambassador Richard Holbrooke to establish normal relations with Vietnam during that period of time. That collapsed for any number of reasons that we could talk about later at a more in class or something like that. But in the collapse, Vietnam still needs to normalize. And Mr. Nguyen Quoc reached out to the John McCains and John Kerrys to be the new political bridge. How are we going to get there? We're going to use the Vietnam veteran avenue to build the foundation of moving forward. So during this period of time, John Kerry and John McCain, who are from different political parties and different views of American foreign policy, they become friends. And so the partnership between Vietnam and the United States gets a new mechanism of communicating. So rather than have to go directly from government to government, the United States Senate and these young senators become the bridge. They become the bridge, and it starts with the sort of 10th anniversary. So it was quite a while ago, right? This thing evolves. My role was I got a job at after I went to Vietnam with a film crew to make my version of the Walter Cronkite interview, so I could be a congressman and maybe a senator later. So my career was, this is what I wanted. This is what I always wanted. I had people ask me, do you love Vietnam? No. I went to Vietnam to help myself. I didn't go to Vietnam to create reconciliation. I went so I could be famous.
It's a lot of honesty there, Tommy. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not famous, okay, but I tried to be famous, right? And so in that space, Chinh, I ran for Congress. I was a candidate for Congress. And I went to Vietnam with a crew and you'll see a little bit of it maybe later today. I come back from that trip to Vietnam in 1985, and I am running for Congress in the seat that was held by John F. Kennedy in Massachusetts. And Joe Kennedy Jr., Joe Kennedy III, wants the seat. I have no chance of beating a Kennedy in Massachusetts, zero, right? So I'm not famous, right? My trajectory of being famous is over with, and now what am I going to do? And I said to myself, when I went back I came sufficiently interested in this space that I would then work with John Kerry and John McCain on the normalization process, and that created my next career, which I love, and love being here with Lien-Hang at the Weatherhead Institute. So thank you.
To be clear, Tommy has since redeemed himself. He's done a lot of good things for Vietnam. After his initial phase of using Vietnam for fame and using Vietnam to achieve his political ambition. So we still thank you, Tommy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chinh.
Ambassador?
Am I on? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Thanks, Tommy. And thanks to everyone for inviting me to join you for this great commemoration. Tommy makes a great point in his remarks about the importance of personal relationships, personal experiences, and most of all, trust in building diplomatic relationships, not only between governments, but among peoples. And I think Tommy is a great example of how that works. And he was certainly a great example for me as ambassador to Vietnam 2011 to 14, particularly with regard to the need in diplomacy to build trust. And that was one of my biggest goals as an ambassador, was just to build more trust with the Vietnamese. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and a little bit about the growing importance of the geopolitical elements of the relationship, as well as the now somewhat less important, but still fundamentally important war legacy issues. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1954, so that makes me sort of a middle baby boomer. I grew up watching the Vietnam War on the evening news on television. I opposed the war, as my parents did. And I remember arguing with my high school teachers that you really shouldn't have to worry about a unified Vietnam under a communist regime, because Vietnamese nationalism will ensure that they won't be a Chinese pawn. They won't just accommodate themselves to Chinese interests. They're adults, they have agency, and we can build a relationship with them. I used to argue that as a high school student. It was geopolitical, even if I didn't know it at the time. But I carried a lot of these ideas along with me into my ambassadorship in 2011. Let's first very briefly review some of the reasons why the United States and Vietnam normalized relations in 1995. It took 20 years for us to normalize relations. It was a long, gradual process. It was a very sensitive process in domestic political terms in both Vietnam and the United States. And war legacy, addressing war legacy issues was at the top of the agenda in the 80s and 90s as we moved closer to normalizing relations. And if you read President Clinton's remarks on announcing that we were going to normalize with Vietnam in July of 1995, it was all about missing in action. He opened his remarks by saying Vietnam has improved its dealing its handling of American service members missing in action, and that's why we're going to normalize. And because we normalize, that work with the Vietnamese is going to be even more improved. That was basically the sum of President Clinton's remarks. So war legacy issues for both sides were very important. For the Vietnamese side, it was about cleaning up Agent Orange. It was about assisting people with disabilities, and it was about cleaning the thousands and thousands of tons of ammunition up, unexploded ordnance up, that was all over Vietnam, both in the north and in the south. So these were top priority issues when we normalized. They remained top priority issues for decades after normalization, and the whole relationship is basically built on the success of our handling of these war legacy issues. That said, as we entered the 2000s, and as the Chinese became wealthier, more powerful, and more assertive and aggressive throughout the region, the geopolitical component of the relationship grew in importance. And I saw my task as ambassador when I arrived in Vietnam, not just to address war legacy issues, but to develop a geopolitically driven relationship with Vietnam. What does that mean? Well, it means, for one thing, in a negative sense, we're not going to establish an alliance with Vietnam. There are lots of enthusiastic iron colonels in the Pacific Command who think Vietnam is our next best ally. Excuse me. There are lots of iron colonels in the Pacific Command who want to make Vietnam an ally. That's highly unlikely. Vietnam is right there next to China. The Chinese went to war with Vietnam partly as a response to Vietnam's conclusion of an alliance with the Soviet Union. They have established in their official foreign policy that they don't want alliances with any other countries. They don't want to align with any other countries against one other country. That's well established in both in their defense and their foreign policy. So Vietnam's not going to be an ally with the United States. The United States isn't going to permanently station military forces in Vietnam. Developing a geostrategic, geopolitical relationship with Vietnam, for me, was going to be principally about developing the economic relationship. It was going to be principally about close dialogue with the Vietnamese on what we're doing, what we want to do in the region, and what they want to do, and cooperating to pursue our common strategic interests in the region. Those common strategic interests are not just about the South China Sea, and at least morally supporting the Vietnamese claims to the features they claim in the South China Sea. It was about cooperating with Vietnam diplomatically throughout the region. And in fact, even as early as 2010, the Vietnamese supported American membership in the East Asia Summit in opposition to the Russians and the Chinese. So we owe our membership in the East Asia Summit, which is an annual multilateral meeting in Southeast Asia every year. We owe our membership in that forum partly to the Vietnamese, who were ASEAN chairman in 2010. Secretary Clinton went to Vietnam in July of 2010. She announced the importance of stability in Southeast Asia and freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. The first time a senior American official had declared an American strategic interest in that region since the 1970s. Again, President Obama, in a speech in Canberra in late 2011, announced the American implementation of our rebalance, or the pivot to East Asia. He said that now that we were pulling out of Iraq and Afghanistan, we needed to pay more attention and devote more resources to increasing our influence in the East Asia Pacific region. He was particularly focused on Southeast Asia, And when I went to Vietnam in 2011, I thought of myself as implementing President Obama's overall policy of the rebalance in the region with Vietnam. And that means in sort of hardcore Machiavellian realist diplomacy, that means working with Vietnam to establish a balance of power in Southeast Asia, particularly continental Southeast Asia, in which China is not able to dominate the region, and that remains open to American economic, commercial, investment, military, and diplomatic interests. That's sort of in general a realist perspective on the growing importance of geopolitics in the U.S. Vietnam relationship. And in practical terms, that meant for me, first and probably foremost, persuading the Vietnamese government to join the negotiations on the establishment of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Area. The TPP was the economic component of President Obama's rebalance to the region. It was our economic strategy for drawing the Southeast Asians closer to the United States and working with other partners within that framework from outside of the region, like Japan, Canada, Australia. So the TPP was the economic component of President Obama's rebalance strategy. And the Vietnamese understood that the Trans-Pacific Partnership was not just important economically, it was important strategically because it would allow them to diversify their economic partners and not rely exclusively on the already huge economic relationship they had with China. The Vietnamese understood the strategic importance of TPP, I think, before Washington did, but it wasn't long before the Washingtonians figured it out, with my help. A second goal was to keep building trust by continuing to address war legacy issues. And perhaps the single most important war legacy issue for me was the remediation of Agent Orange contamination in major areas of contamination in Vietnam. That started at Da Nang Airport. And I had the honor of joining Vermont Senator Leahy in April 2014 in Da Nang to start up our project to basically bake thousands and thousands of cubic meters of contaminated soil and clean up Da Nang Airport so that the airport could perform its role in the economic development of the whole central Vietnam region. We moved, and that was about a $150 million project. It has since been completed. We have moved on to a much bigger project north of Ho Chi Minh City at what was then Bien Hoa Airport. That project has been stalled by the administration's cutoff of assistance through AID. Hopefully it will be restarted. It's already restarted. I'm not sure who on the ground is implementing it for us since we've eliminated AID, but I was glad to hear that we've restarted funding for the project. Another important goal, although this was an economic and diplomatic project for me, developing this geopolitical relationship, an important component remained defense and security. And we signed a memorandum on defense cooperation in September 2011, shortly after I arrived as ambassador, which was important. It helped us increase U.S. Navy ship visits to Vietnam. Secretary Panetta actually visited Cam Ranh Bay while I was ambassador, the first time an American had visited Cam Ranh Bay, of course, since the war. Human rights remained high, an important piece of the agenda. And as ambassador, I hoped not just to name and shame the Vietnamese on their human rights record, but to find a way to realistically advance the human rights agenda in Vietnam. And I did that by suggesting to the Vietnamese that we had a problem in Washington. Both my side and the Vietnamese side want Vietnamese participation in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but you won't get full congressional support without demonstrable progress in human rights. Some of my colleagues in the foreign ministry agreed with that. We sat down and we developed a realistic agenda to improve human rights in Vietnam, including Vietnamese membership in the UN Convention Against Torture, Vietnamese release of political prisoners, registration of unofficial churches, etc. And I boiled that down to a to-do list, and I gave a plasticized card to all of my political and economic officers in the embassy, and they went down this to-do list with their Vietnamese counterparts at every opportunity. So TPP membership gave us huge leverage on human rights. And the Vietnamese understood this, and we achieved at least some modest progress in this area. All of that leverage evaporated when President Trump pulled us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership in January 2017. Finally, again, on building trust, I resolved, shortly after I arrived, to improve my embassy's relationship with the Vietnamese Communist Party. You did that with the Communist Party, you ask? And the answer is, well, they're the ones who run the country. They're the ones who manage the relationship with China, not the foreign ministry. So I thought it was very important as a general project to improve our relationship, to deepen trust with the Vietnamese Communist Party. And that effort started a process that ultimately led in 2015 to the visit to the United States of Party General Secretary Chup, which was the first time a Vietnamese Communist Party General Secretary had visited the United States, and which greatly propelled progress in the relationship, I believe. We established a comprehensive partnership, a strategic partnership in 2013. We established a comprehensive strategic partnership, carrying it forward in 2023, just 2 years ago. That's right. That's right. So we've seen great progress in the relationship, not just in war legacy issues, but in economic relations, despite President Trump's effort to slap tariffs on Vietnam, and in the overall geopolitical diplomatic relationship and our exchanges with the Vietnamese on that topic. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm so grateful to the University of Columbia and Dr. Lien-Hang for inviting me and also for organizing this very meaningful symposium. And I'm also very honored to share this stage with distinguished individuals, Dr. Lien-Hang, moderators, Chinh, business leaders, Ambassador David Shear, and Professor Thomas Vallely, who have offered their compelling insights drawn from their first-hand experience and contribute a long-standing contribution to our ties. And now allow me, of course, to save time, just to deliver my prepared remarks. Why I'm not a historian by professions, but as a diplomat, I would like to share a few reflections that may resonate with you. As I reflect on the journey from the end of the war in Vietnam to the normalization of diplomatic relations, I believe that the core of every human being lies at the core of the human beings lies the fundamental design for peace, freedom, and happiness. Yet history, sometimes sometimes compels individuals to fight for those aspirations. And the war in Vietnam was one such instance. Our people fought to safeguard our independence, national unity, and intrinsic right to peace. When wars conclude, our true nature re-emerges, urging us to reclaim peace, freedom, and happiness. However, yearning alone is insufficient. Reconciliation requires political will, courage, and individuals willing to take on the role of trailblazers. Our two countries have been fortunate to have such individuals. Generations of Vietnamese leaders and senior officers alongside their American counterparts, including the late Senator John McCain, former Secretary John Kerry, Senator Patrick Leahy, and of course, Dr. Vallely, who is with us today, though he said he does not love Vietnam, but I believe that the big inspiration that for him to do such things. Normalization marked the first turning point in our post-war history. I would now like to turn to the next chapter, our transition from normalized ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Bilateral cooperation steadily expanded under the Clinton and Bush administrations. By President Obama's second term, the breadth and the substance of our relationship had grown sufficiently to launch our comprehensive partnership in 2013. And over the next decade, our ties deepened across all pillars. Even during the Trump administrations, there were calls from the U.S. side for a strategic partnership. Here, Ambassador Christian Brink met me several times at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and asked me why the U.S. has not been upgraded into strategic partnership. Yeah. So under President Biden, the signals from both sides became increasingly clear. Before departing Hanoi to assume my ambassadorships in early 2022, I consulted with many leaders and former leaders of Vietnam, all of whom believed the time had come for a new phase in our relationships. Among the people of Vietnam, I think at the time, perhaps 8 out of 10 would have agreed. The conditions, as you may say, were ripe now. However, this was a significant policy decision with critical and long-term implications. Throughout 2022 and much of 2023, the Vietnamese side sought unequivocal consensus across branches of government, and most importantly, among our top leaders. During his period, General Secretary Nguyen emerged as a unifying voice, coordinating key decision makers in support of elevating ties with the United States. His leadership was instrumental, and his guiding hand continues to inspire us all. Over the past 18 months, our two nations have reaped the benefits of these historic decisions, and the results have confirmed that our choice was the right one. Today, as we commemorate 50 years of peace, 30 years of diplomatic ties, and my assistant. Right. And 2 years of comprehensive strategic partnership, I invite us to reflect on the forces that have shaped our journey and to distill some enduring lessons. To provide some food for thought, I will highlight 4 main drivers of our partnership. First, the post-Cold global environment has enabled both countries to move beyond past hostility and focus on economic cooperation for mutual growth and development. Second, the once painful legacies of war have become the glue that binds our partnership, laying a foundation of trust, understanding, and empathy. Third, Vietnam's reforms under đổi mới, remarkable social economic growth, and proactive economic integrations have attracted U.S. investment and created more favorable conditions for bilateral engagement. Fourth, the commitment of leaders, government agencies, businesses, and citizens on both sides has been indispensable, shaping both the principles and daily collaborations that sustain our partnerships. Beyond these historical circumstances, the Vietnam-U.S. relationship has anchored by the core values of our peoples. First is the value of mutual understanding, empathy, and conscience. Second is a shared longing for peace and development. And third is the courage and resolve. The will to stand up for what is right, just, and beneficial for the peoples of both nations. Fourth is a recognition of common interests, which can be achieved through enhanced dialogues. As our two countries enter a new era of growth, Vietnam-U.S. relations are poised to deepen in substance and impact bilaterally, regionally, and globally. The achievements we have made will serve as a solid foundation. The drivers behind our partnership remain strong, and the core values of our people will continue to guide us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Then how much time do we have for questions and answers?
We go until 12:45.
Okay, so we have a number of questions and time for questions and answers. Thank you for our speakers. I thought those comments were extremely profound and astute. Ambassador, I really liked your views at the 30th year, what America's perspective was, what Vietnam's perspective was. Everybody thought it was economy, China, but it was really about the essentials, which is our MIAs, and from Vietnam, Asian Orange. So it's very insightful. I didn't realize that. And Ambassador, really like your opening comments when you talk about the core values. Everybody's at our core, everybody's pursuing happiness, and everybody's pursuing peace. I thought that was very insightful. And of course, Tommy's very insightful comment that he doesn't like Vietnam. Let's everyone remember that as well.
Oh, it's a differentiation. It's a differentiation between love and like. So I like them a lot.
I think with that, why don't we open to questions and answers from the audience here. Anybody have any questions or comments from the audience? Yes.
Ming, he's a student, a very gifted.
Please start lining up if you have a question. It might take you a time. He is a gifted student.
Hello. Thank you very much for being here today. I am Ming. I am a current student, first year freshman at Columbia College, studying history and economics. And my question is mostly directed at Ambassador Dzung and Ambassador Shear. Is given Vietnam's already deep and comprehensive economic and diplomatic relationship, and considering the recent developments in defense cooperation, for example, with the purchasing of trainer aircraft and former U.S. Coast Guard cutters, is there potential for even more growth in cooperation in this dimension regarding regional security and defense? Thank you.
Of course, I think there's a lot of great potentials for security and defense cooperation. It's just one of the important pillars in our CSP agreement. And you've seen that there has been a lot of progress and achievements made in these areas. Like last year in December, the U.S. has participated in the very biggest ever exhibition, military exhibition in Vietnam, with very big shows from a lot of equipment and modern aircrafts, etc. in Vietnam. And this year, I think we plan to welcome another visits of the aircraft carriers of the United States. But I think that still there are great potentials for cooperations. But we should, do it in a very comfortable way, comfortable for both sides. It would take some time, but I think we are moving in that direction. But it cannot be as very fast as some expect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good question. I agree with Ambassador Dzung. Did I hear correctly that Vietnam has agreed to buy F-16s from the United States?
I have no information about that yet, but why not?
We'll take that as agreement. Yes.
I'm not the one who decides.
I actually agree completely with Ambassador Dzung here. One of my challenges as an ambassador, an American ambassador in Hanoi, was that Washington has huge expectations. It has expectations about the economic relationship with Vietnam, huge expectations about the possibilities for defense cooperation and diplomatic cooperation throughout the region as well. And those expectations sometimes overshadow, in Washington at least, a realistic understanding of what Vietnam's limitations are. And I think Vietnam's interest in closer defense cooperation with the United States is genuine, but there are clear limitations on how far they can go. One is the Chinese are watching all the time, and the Chinese are not shy about making their views known very bluntly to the Vietnamese. Second is the Vietnamese government is fairly fiscally strapped. So it may be good news that they've agreed to buy F-16s, but they're sacrificing something else probably to spend all that money on big, expensive American weapon systems. So we need to be realistic about what kinds of weapon systems the Vietnamese are capable and interested in buying. And finally, on the defense side, Vietnam has had a long and close relationship with Russia, first the Soviet Union, then Russia, and that led to the establishment of a defense procurement process that is very different from ours. And that's something that American defense producers have been challenged getting used to. So it's like a cultural issue in defense relations. We're working I work to get over these as an ambassador, and I think we're still working on it very diligently. But managing expectations for me in Washington as an ambassador was quite a challenge.
I think Vietnam overall has done a great job, Ambassador, of navigating the political relationships from the U.S. to China, Japan, and everybody around the Southeast Asian and Asian regions. It's no small feat that you can keep the U.S. happy, you can keep China managed, and you have a relationship with all your economic partners. So it's a pretty remarkable job, actually.
Thank you.
Next question.
Oh, hi. Good morning. My name is John Fermella. I'm a second year at the law school and an MA student formerly in the history department under Quoc. And if I may continue off of like the previous question, beyond the U.S. Vietnam defense cooperation, I saw recently that India and Vietnam have been working a lot on like naval and Coast Guard exchanges, and also 7 days ago there was an agreement with India to sell to Vietnam BrahMos anti-ship missiles, which is, I think it's kind of kind of is an escalation in a sense. But I was wondering if by cooperating with India and Indonesia and these other East Indo-Pacific countries in defense manufacturing, is there a way that that could actually align with U.S. Vietnam defense objectives, even without partnering with the U.S.? And are the different Vietnamese branches, such as the Army versus the Navy and the Air Force, maybe you like have the Army focused more on Russian weapons procurement, but are the other branches like the Air Force looking more towards the U.S. and the Navy and Coast Guard maybe more looking to India? And so I was just wondering if you have a sense on the divergence in the Vietnamese defense community. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We have about 15, 20 minutes left, so we're going to ask a number of other questions, and we'll answer it all at once, okay? So why don't you pose your question, if you don't mind?
Hi, thank you for a great speech. I'm Mark. I'm a sophomore studying political science. So my question is for Ambassador Dzung. Was Vietnam brand strategy for foreign policy? Was Vietnam long-term for how the world look like? Because as of right now, the old world system has been collapsed, but the new world order hasn't been established yet. And more conflict had happened in the past few years, even conflict between the great power, what Vietnam wanted that, like how would Vietnam respond to conflicts or skirmishes between great world power or medium level power, and just overall, what's the new world order that Vietnam would want to see in the next 20, 30 years, or even longer than that? Thank you.
Okay, next question. We'll take 2 more questions, and we'll answer them in due course. Please.
Hi, my name's Artemis. I'm a third year in the dual degree with Columbia, studying history and economics. And my question was, what does the landscape look like for human rights now that, as you've mentioned, the U.S. leverage of being in the TPP has changed? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, please.
Hi. My name is Callisto. I'm a third year political science major, but I also was in the Vietnam War course with Professor Vallely and Professor Lien-Hang. And I wanted to know, from like an anecdote standpoint, what is one story you have demonstrating the difficulty of reconciliation or foreign diplomacy in a post-reconciliation world? And what is one anecdote of like a great success that you had? Because I think that stories are really good at, and also it's fun to hear different names dropped.
Okay, we'll start with those 4 questions, and our panelists can answer them in any order you wish. Maybe starting with Ambassador?
Yeah, which ambassador? Okay. But the first question is about what's the important weapons from other countries. You're right that Vietnam, our policy is to diversify our military's stockpiles. We don't want to rely on certain countries for this, our stock of weapons, etc. So, but it is a process. It would take some time, and of course we will are discussing with many other countries, including India, South Korea, Israel, to see what we can buy from them and to serve our defense. But on the question is whether it's in line with the U.S. policies. I think yes. But maybe our Ambassador David Shear can clarify it for me. And I'm not in the military service, so I don't know which sectors in the army or in the military needs a certain weapon or equipment from certain countries. Maybe you know. I'm not sure about it. Should I continue with other questions?
How about an anecdote regarding the success or anecdote regarding the failure? I like the last question a lot.
The anecdote
regarding a success story or failure?
Success story. As I said in my remarks, sometimes the conditions for reconciliations, for the upgrade of the relations, the condition may be ripe, but it's not enough because it needs some very, very brave political decisions. For the case of the upgrade of the from comprehensive partnership to strategic comprehensive partnerships in 2023, for example, some people call it as a double upgrade. Double upgrades because they think that there's several levels. First one is comprehensive partnerships. The next one will be strategic partnership, and the highest one will be strategic comprehensive partnerships. But for us, at first, our intention is just to upgrade to strategic partnerships. But the proposal came from the U.S. side to the ESSP, and it was us to think for a while, and then we thought that it was a very logical proposal, because for 10 years, over 10 years, we had already been comprehensive partners of each other's. So now we want to upgrade. So there's no reason why we delete the word comprehensive. If we upgrade, we just add one more word, So it's already comprehensive. So now we add one more word, strategic comprehensive. Yeah, it's just a logic. Yeah, that's it.
With regard to the, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. With regard to the first question on Vietnam cooperation with India and other countries on defense issues, the U.S. encourages this. We encourage it because the U.S. is basically challenged in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is not the highest region on the American strategic priority list. Right now, Ukraine and the Middle East are. That's usually the case. Second, we don't do a lot of infrastructure development assistance in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, I think, needs over $20 trillion in infrastructure investments over the next few decades, and the U.S. just isn't there to provide it. The Chinese, Japanese, and South Koreans are providing it, which, again, is a challenge for the United States. We're challenged militarily because our forces are stretched very thin throughout the region. They're concentrated mostly in Northeast Asia. We have bases in Japan, South Korea. We have active presence in the Philippines, but it's from the Philippines up where our forces are concentrated. So in terms of the level of our influence, we're challenged. So we need to compensate for that, and we do that by promoting networking among like-minded countries. A major example of this is the quadrilateral, the Quad, which is India, United States, Australia, and Japan. This is a diplomatic grouping that increases our leverage collectively throughout the region. It's not a nascent alliance, it's a diplomatic grouping. It has immediate diplomatic benefits for us. We encourage the Japanese, the Philippines, and Vietnam to cooperate. The Japanese and the Australians, the Indians and the Vietnamese. This is a way of networking like-minded countries that increases our diplomatic leverage and increases our ability to operate militarily if necessary. So those kinds of relationships are very, very important to us, and I think important to regional security. On the, just very quickly, on the challenge of reconciliation and success, I had them all wrapped into one in one event. I had Secretary of Defense Panetta was visiting in a week. This was shortly after my arrival as ambassador. Secretary Panetta was visiting in the week. I got a call from the Foreign Ministry saying that the Vietnamese police were about to arrest an American citizen who was staked out at a recovery site for a downed Air Force officer. And this American citizen appeared to the people on the scene to be kind of off emotionally. And this person claimed that his father was still being held by the Vietnamese. This was in 2011 or early 2012. This person claimed that their father was still being held by the Vietnamese, and the fact that U.S. military was conducting a recovery operation at this site in central Vietnam was a hoax. And they were in touch with a journalist in Florida who was going to explode this publicly and humiliate both the Vietnamese and American governments. This was a week before the Panetta visit, and they wanted to throw this person in jail. So after quite a bit of back and forth with the Vietnamese government, the Vietnamese military, and the Indo-Pacific Command, we decided to close down we decided to take a risk. We decided to close down the recovery operation, pack up and leave, and ignore the person in hopes that they would just go away. And it worked. It worked. A week before Panetta arrived, I had avoided the arrest of an American citizen. So that was both a challenge and a success relating to reconciliation, or the lack thereof.
Is there a question that hasn't been answered? Anecdote one? Yeah, I have so many anecdotes, I don't know where to start. I would say if the anecdote is what has not happened, in the relationship between, it's really not really between the United States. I think the diplomatic services of both countries are extremely well represented here, and obviously the United States and Vietnam have a vibrant, very, very vibrant diplomatic relationship. You know, in Vietnam, not all ministries work as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think the central bank works really well. I think the Ministry of Public Security works well. But I think in general, Mr. Tolam is right to reform the public sector the way that he's doing, and I think that's really important. And I think that will lead to a lot of other things. But what has not happened in the post-war normalization is one disappointment. We're going to talk about it in the next panel. Is Vietnam has not created, and this gets a little bit into the question about human rights. The most important event in my career that happened in Vietnam was the deregulation of the internet. So Vietnam differs from China in the sense that Vietnam has a relatively open internet, so that rather than a single company or a single agency of the government, Vietnam's internet is controlled by a group of state-owned operators. The competition that those three entities created in a form of openness, and that openness in the digital space, I think, creates modern Vietnam. As much as anything that happens between the nations, I think amongst themselves, the deregulation of the internet became the main engine of Vietnamese success. And in the next panel, I am going to hopefully argue with the current ambassador to the United Nations about our differing views on how that could be expanded. So stand by.
I think your question is a good one regarding anecdotes. 30 years ago, when the first delegation came back to Vietnam, the one where I was a part of, it was canceled twice because there was no trust. The trust in the Vietnamese government was not there. The Vietnamese government did not trust the delegation. And the last time it broke down was 2 weeks before the delegation was about to arrive over airlines. There was a 7-hour discussions regarding whether the Henry Kravises and Catherine Grahams of the world can fly in their own private jet. And the Vietnamese government said, absolutely not. You're flying in on Vietnam Airlines. And the contention was, we don't want to do that because those are Russian-made jets. We don't trust Russian-made jets. And it just went back and forth. It was the silliest argument I ever seen. And of course, we were able to convince the Americans that Russian-made jets are fine. You can fly on Vietnamese airline. And then promptly they lost people's luggage at Hanoi Airport. And so it comes down to trust. It comes down to basic human communications at the end of the day. So thank you for that question. We have time
All
for
right.
two more.
I'm sorry. There's questions about Vietnam foreign policies. I will be very, very brief. You know, you're right that we are now living in a changing world, and of course, sometimes we have to experience turbulences. Yeah. But in that environment, of course, we should be resilient, and so our foreign policies should be very consistent. We have made clear that our foreign policy will be policies of peace, self-independence, and self-reliance, etc. And we want to be friends of all countries in the world. We want to be faithful partners with all. And of course, you also maybe heard about the four no policies. That's no military alliance, no military base in our countries, no use of force, and one more. Maybe Professor Quy, remember, I don't know. Yes, but we will stick to that. And I think we will continue our foreign policies in years to come. Yeah, thank you.
So we have two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Please.
Hi, everyone. My name is John, and I am a freshman at Fordham University, major in finance. My question is for Ambassador Dzung. So over the past 30 years, the U.S. Vietnam partnerships have thrived a lot, and notably in the educations with initiatives like the Fulbright University in Vietnam. So looking ahead, what are the strategic plans to first improve economic development, and second, strengthen education to more Vietnamese students like me benefit a better education? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bao Pham. I'm a third-year Columbia College student and a newly accepted student to a SEPA program. Thank you, Professor Hang, for the recommendation. Thank you. Thank you. And my question is for Tommy. As a veteran in the Vietnam War, and now being here, like talking with Ambassador Shear, Ambassador Dzung, and also you said in your class that you were in the beast with President Joe Biden in Vietnam. Like, how do you feel like your two countries, the two countries that you really loved, and the two countries that have brought me so much, like, I'm so grateful to be here. Like, I'm so grateful to go to high school here, to go to college here, and to be at graduate school here. And I'm like born and raised in Vietnam, and of course I love the country. Like, how does it feel, like, the two countries that you're so connected with being comprehensive strategic partners, and like right now, like we're both living in peace, and that feeling, like, can you explain? Thank you. Feels great, right?
It does. So, should I? So, the question over here, I'm less sure of what. Oh, higher education. Vietnam. One of the things that Vietnam does not fix. Again, we'll talk about this later today. One of the things, unfortunately, and I think this is common knowledge. I'm not saying anything that is not pretty well known in Vietnam at the highest levels. Is that Vietnam needs a new growth model, and that new growth model is based on higher value economies. Higher value economies come from a higher, an efficient and highly active and powerful higher education system. And Vietnam's needs vast improvement for Vietnam to be able to continue the kind of growth it's had for the last 2 decades. So there needs to be a huge amount of reform in that area. Mr. Tolam is completely aware of this dilemma, and I think he will take some action. With respect to Bao's question, Bao, thank you very much. I'm glad I failed to be an American politician. I'm glad that I failed because I loved my second career deeply. I cannot explain how much I love working on these issues, and I love coming to class. So Lien-Hang announced that her institute is 75 years old. I am also 75 years old. So I am very pleased in my 75th year to be able to have the position I have in meeting this generation, your generation, Bao, of very talented and gifted Vietnamese students from around the world. And so, I just absolutely, I'm not afraid of a lot of people. I'm sort of afraid of Chinh. I don't know why. But I'm so happy about this that I don't want to overstate how much I'm sort of pleased with myself. But I get great energy from the opportunity that coming to Columbia and being with all of you has done for me. So thank you.
May I? Just very briefly, the great thing about being as an ambassador is that you have all these this country team at your disposal. You have these team of diplomats in your embassy, not only from the State Department, but from a lot of other agencies of the U.S. government. For example, in Hanoi, I had State Department political and economic officers. I had public affairs officers from the State Department, but I also had AID, the Centers for Disease Control, USTR, U.S. Trade Representative, DOD with a defense attaché. I had a defense cooperation office for arms sales, and I had a variety. CIA, of course, is there as well. So you have at your disposal as an ambassador all of the tools of statesmanship. You have diplomacy, you have intelligence, you have economic policy, you have military presence. These are the main components of statecraft. And you can use all of those people in your embassy to get things done. You can have them coordinate among each other an embassy policy, an American policy, much more easily than you can have their people back in Washington coordinate. So one of the most gratifying things as an ambassador is to send a cable back to Washington saying, here's what we've decided in the embassy, here's what we're going to do, and if we don't hear from you in 24 hours, we're going to execute. That's very gratifying. And then you call, then you wait for them to call. And if they don't call, you go. It's lots of independence if you're bold and you are not risk averse, and lots of ways of forwarding aggressively American interests in that country.
It's very good experience. I should learn from you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that wraps up our session for this morning, afternoon. Thank you very much to our panelists, and special thanks to Lien. I think this is a very important series of sessions as we have the 30th and 50th anniversary. As you know, Mandela was a great person who famously said that reconciliation is not about forgetting. Reconciliation is about having the right perspectives and working together. And also, it's very, very important, Mandela says, to not have the legal framework, but it's really about the hearts and minds and all working together toward the common objectives. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody coming here.
Just a note, we have a very brief break. There are refreshments, I think, outside, because you cannot have any food or beverage in the auditorium, but we will be starting again at 1 p.m. So do not venture far. And while this was the history of U.S. Vietnam reconciliation, the next one is the future of U.S. Vietnam relations. Yes. Okay. Picture.